All right. I know earlier in the program, in an earlier lesson, we talked about, some sales mindset, right? Best practices before the call, but let's actually go over what happens after we're off the call, right? This is going to be mindset of sales calls. I know the last one was sales mindset, right? Going into it. This is going to be the mindset of sales calls afterwards. So first things first, things we got to ask ourselves is, how did it go, right? How did the call go? Did the prospect close? Why or why not, right? You need to make sure that you understand everything that is happening in your agency, both the good and the bad, right? The things that bring you money and the things that are costing you money. You need to know all those things and in between. In fact, a great mentor of mine actually told me that if you don't know the score on the scoreboard, you really can't make good decisions and grow from there, right? And that rule is especially true when it comes to your sales calls, okay? And in a later lesson, we're actually gonna be covering some sales KPIs to look out for and all of that, so don't worry about that. But for now, let's talk about this, how to get better from this, okay? So hopefully you are recording these sales calls so that you can listen back and study it, right? This is typically what I mean by checking the scoreboard, right? How did that call go? How did it close, did it not, right? Why or why not? Right? Check that scoreboard. Hey, we had this many calls and we had this many closes, this many no-shows, this many blah, blah. All those things are what I mean by scoreboard. Again, we'll go into all the KPIs later on, but just kind of like a little preview to all that, okay? So first things first, one of the first things I always ask is, how did you sound? How did you sound on the sales call? Do you think that you sounded good, right? When you listen back, you're like, yeah, I think I sounded good. I think I crushed that. I just didn't close. So, do you think that you sounded good, but in reality, maybe you sounded like you were unsure and that translated into uncertainty to that prospect on the phone, right? Maybe they heard your voice, your tone of voice, and was like, this guy sounds a little shaky, this girl sounds a little shaky, I'm not really sure if I can trust in this person. Big important question to ask yourself. So listen to that next time you have a sales call and record them and listen back, okay? So, next thing is, did they ask a question that maybe you might have kind of danced around and avoided answering directly? Very important. Happens all the time. When we get nervous on sales calls, totally normal. It happens. Don't worry about it. This is the purpose of listening back and getting better from it, right? We have to figure out, how did I sound? Did they ask a question and I kind of went off on a tangent because I was nervous and I started explaining all this other stuff that it wasn't relevant to the question they just asked. Very important to note that too, because then it seems like you're avoiding something and that translates into uncertainty as well. And on the flip side of that, maybe the call went extremely well and you just, you want to make sure that you can replicate and do exactly what you just did so you can just continue to bring in sales over and over again. Also very important, right? Here's another question. How did you explain certain questions that they asked? How did you explain it? Did it make sense? Was it crystal clear? Was it something that they could easily follow along and understand? Or were you going above and beyond, from their zone of genius, right? Which is if you're talking marketing and they're in a different lane, they don't know what click-through rate is, they don't know what leads are, they don't know what all that stuff is, right? You might have to explain it to them. We'll get into that all that stuff later, don't worry. But here's another question. Where did that lead even come from? Where did they come from? Were they already warm from like a referral or just cold traffic from a Facebook ad? Very important too. Did you close the one that was cold traffic? Great. What did you do? Did you close the one that was a referral? Great. What did you do? How'd they get there? Who did they come from? And why did that person refer you, right? All these things are going to give you so much clarity and it's going to continue to help you grow. All these things matter because it brings you clarity. It's going to help you grow. So let me share with you the number one rule of sales calls. You ready for it? And no, it's not to close the sale and make money. I mean, yes, do that, of course, duh, right? But the number one rule of sales calls is always get better. Learn about it. The good and the bad. Again, replicate the good, course correct the bad. Super important, right? Don't get pissed off. Don't get depressed. Don't get discouraged, about the sales not closing over and over again. That's going to happen. Don't worry about that. Ask yourself, what could I have done better? What could I have done better? Then, on the next call, practice. Practice that thing that you just told yourself. How can I get better? This is what I could have done. Great, I'm going to practice that on the next sales call. And go out there and get a next sales call if you don't have one already, right? It makes you hungry for it again, to practice what you feel would move you closer into closing the sale, right? And hopefully all these trainings are going to help you do that exactly. exactly the way we expect it to, right? Let me share a quick story with you. There was actually a student that I used to coach that literally didn't close a sale. I think it was like 8 months of trying. Like 8 months. That's a long time of just like trying and trying and trying and like no cigar, right? Imagine how discouraged that you would be. Maybe this is you already, but imagine how discouraged that you either are currently, maybe, and or that you might be, right? If you tried over and over again to land a client and it just wasn't happening, right? Just wasn't happening. Like, it happens. Don't worry, don't give up, because you could actually end up with a success story just like he did, right? So here's what he did. He has since closed in his agency about $4.2 million because he chose to not give up, not to get discouraged. I mean, he was discouraged, he was frustrated, sure, but he didn't let that make him stop. He didn't get pissed off. He learned. He made adjustments. He asked himself, what could I have done better? Right? And he continued to go out there and make it happen. And you can too. So, write this down before you forget. The number one rule of sales calls is to always get better. Always get better. That is going to be the fundamental question that you ask yourself throughout the sales calls, right? All the other metrics, all the other KPIs, all the other things, the targets and goals and all that kind of stuff, super important too. But always keep track of how you can get better. Ask yourself that question. The good, the bad, right? Replicate the good, course correct the bad. And if you do that, you'll be a sales machine. Wouldn't you want to be a sales machine, right? We're creating this ATM, right? This automated machine that we can just build and build and build and create wealth. That's what we want for you. That's the goal of this whole program, right? So stick with the path and remember this lesson, watch this lesson, remind yourself to watch it monthly if you need to, okay? Very important. I promise you, it'll make all the difference. It'll start shifting things in the right direction. So with that, you're doing amazing. Let's continue the path, and I'll see you in the next lesson.